I'm Amanda, and this is Not Your Granny's Quilt Show. Hey, everybody, welcome to today's episode. Woo! This one is a zinger. I have Ian Danger Capstick on the show this week as my guest. He is the host of Art Against Empire, a podcast digging into the social political history of quilting, fiber, textile art. So if you haven't listened to any of his episodes yet, I highly, highly encourage you to go. He has great interviews with multiple ranging textile artists and people in the industry. So I I have loved every second that I have consumed, and I can't wait for more. So go jump into that. And he's also on Instagram as Quilt Queerly. He helps host some spaces in the Nook over at Zach Foster's Quilty Nook. So you could check him out there. Go hang out with him. And otherwise, this conversation runs the gambit of everything, all the things, mental health, quilting, social media, political things. And it's just such a fun, eye-opening, informational, important conversation. And I am just so happy to share it with you guys. So let's dive in. Hi, Ian. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm so good. I'm so excited to have you on the show.
Excited to be here.
Yeah. So you are Ian Danger Capstick, and you are, well, known as Quilt Clearly on Instagram, but you also have a podcast called Art Against Empire. And I was just telling you how your latest episode, or January 29th episode, kicked my ass. So in the best way. And I love the whole series so far. And so I just hearing that just really was like, okay, this was like really kismet that we could do this so quickly. So anyway, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. I've listened to and loved this podcast for a really long time. I've been quilting
Mm.
for a while, and it's like a little like home base for me every now and then you turn it on. I feel like we're in my quilting room now in my area, but you've been in here before, like without you knowing it in the speaker,
Wow.
with Matt Wilding and Zach Foster, Libs Elliott, I think as well. Maybe anyway, it's just wonderful.
Yeah. Yeah. Unfortunately, I haven't had Libs yet. I would love to chat with her, but
Oh, I'll
we'll
we'll,
see.
I'll put you in touch.
Oh,
Let's
thank
do
you
it.
so much.
We'll
Thank you.
DM each
Thank you.
other.
Okay, great. I love that. Well, yeah, so I want to talk about your podcast and how you got there and all the things that are going on. But first, we need to know how you even got into sewing and quilting in the first place.
Yeah, sure. Okay, I love this. I was not allowed to quilt and sew and most things growing up as a boy. Like I grew up
Mm.
on military bases, so it's
Oh,
just
okay.
kind of like boy stuff.
Hmm.
And every now and then I would get to go to my grandma's house in Montreal, which is actually where I live now. And she had this incredible craft cupboard, and I just felt so seen every time I was allowed to dig in there with these bits and baubles and stuff that she saved from all over the place. And I was always really drawn to cross stitch as well. My mom was an
Mm.
avid cross stitcher. So she taught me that when I was maybe 12 or 13 years old. I took it up like a lot. That and rug hooking. So those
Oh,
were my
yeah.
two first textile arts.
Okay.
And then I gave it all up. Honestly, like I went into politics in Canada. I worked at the highest levels of Canadian politics as a press
Mm.
secretary and political assistant. I went on to be owner of an advertising agency, and then the creativity really started to creep back in. At that point, when you run a little small shop, you're doing everything for yourself. So I went from like
Yeah.
in politics, like the only textiles thing I ever had to do was like steam the flags. That's it for a while, and then I realized things need to be more tactile, in the work that I was doing as a creative. So we started bringing in a lot of immersive projects. And one of them, I brought back cross stitching with this giant sort of pegboard. And
Oh,
I thought,
yeah.
oh, jeepers, if I can do this giant version of a cross stitch with a pegboard sort of installation for a queer men's health organization in Ottawa, I was like, maybe I should start cross stitching again. And I did. And at the same time, I was a political pundit on TV. So for, I don't know, like 5, 6 years, I became this random dude that every now and then would just bust out the cross stitch. And then, like so many of your guests and others, the pandemic happened. And I
Mhm.
was like, what do I do? I guess I don't know, like sew up a mask or two, but that becomes, you're done with that. So what do? You Google useful things to sew. I know how to sew.
Yeah.
What am I going to do? Oh, quilts. Cool. So I started making patterned quilts like most people do. And then I discovered improv quilting. I run the LGBTQ room on Zach Foster's Quilty Nook. So,
Okay.
like we call ourselves feral quilters. Like I have zero quilting rules and I love it that way.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I can still bust out like a pattern and some flying geese if I need to, because I've got those foundations.
Right.
Yeah, and I've made everything from like bed quilts, like big, like fill your bed quilts, all the way to little tiny wall quilts and little mug quilts and all of those types of things. Quilty
Yeah.
totes is my favorite thing to do. And then I got into naturally like quilty banners of all things. I'm in
Mm-hmm.
politics. So I quilt a lot of banners. And I
Yeah.
do a lot of banner making, in political days and those types of things. And they're very ephemeral. They go away so fast. So I thought,
Right.
I was doing a horticulture degree during the pandemic as well, because I'm
Why
a
not?
busy person. I mean, there's nothing else to do. So
Right.
for my capstone project, I quilted a banner called "I Was Once a Plant," and I was like,
Oh,
"This is fun, love it." It's on my Insta; folks can see it, and I'll send you a photo. But it was done all with organic materials, and the whole idea of the protest banner was the banner itself is protesting. Like I was once a plant. Like remember my origins, remember my
right.
origins. And through that, I also started connecting the politics of quilting to quilts.
Hmm.
And the work that I was doing, I was like, oh, wait a minute, I should think about this more consciously. Like, what's in this fabric? Where did this fabric come from? I went to the fabric store, I got it, but where was it before this? And then in
Hmm.
my brain, I was like, where was it historically before this? Hmm. So that started off a many, many years obsession with the history of thread, activism, sewing, which then, of course, got birthed into the podcast that folks are now listening to. So there you go.
Yeah.
There's the little quilting story in a nutshell.
I love it. I love that. Yeah. And it's always so interesting hearing from people how they get from, you know, oh, I was in my grandma's craft cupboard to like, what are you doing with it now, and how everything that you go through shapes your practice with textiles now. And it's everybody's is so unique and interesting, but somehow we're all still right here, right now. And so I love to hear it. And it's so, I mean, I guess we could just get right into it because it's just like in my brain and I cannot let go of it. But so you mentioned, pulling all that history and the politics of it all into this your podcast, Art Against Empire. And I think it's episode 6 is the January 29th release one. So everybody go listen to it if you haven't already. But it's about the grief that can be expressed through quilting and textiles. And you talk to Zach briefly, you talk to several people who make memory quilts. And I was like, oh, I do that, like that actually became such a staple of my quilting business, which I never set out to have a quilting business that dealt with the clothing of people's dead loved ones. Um and that has kind of been my shift and focus as I took over the business. And people would request, oh, can you just make me this quilt, just like a quilt pattern. And I'm like, no, I don't want to do that anymore. Not only is it not fun doing that for other people, because they are like, I want this exact quilt. And then when you start making that exact quilt, they're like, no, I don't want that. And I'm like, I'm going to literally light it on fire. Um, it just feels like so draining and empty because I'm like, this is theatrics, like whatever. But then when somebody says, my mom died and these were her nightgowns, and I would just be so grateful to have something that I could use that is useful and not just a box stuffed away somewhere. I want her memory out and alive and visible so that when my kids snuggle with it, I can say, these were your grandma's, you know, that really just touched my heart. And then talking about the AIDS quilt and everything that the queer community has gone through, and the ways that y'all have had to fight to be visible and say, hey, we exist, we're people too, we love other human beings just like you love other human beings, and we're watching the ones that we love die systematically because nobody's doing anything about it. And so we're going to put this huge quilt in your face to let you know that we're in trouble, you know, obviously, but I think that and the documentation project I'm working on with Aaron Bush and Caprera, we're doing the mass shooting quilts. I have another panel in my possession that I need to start quilting on. I'm just like, oh, I'm doing the thing. Like,
Doing the thing.
I think I'm isolated. I work alone. I'm in my garage by myself most of the day. And so I just forget that, like, just because that's where I'm at physically doesn't mean that like the work I'm doing doesn't have farther reach and more importance than, okay, it's done, it's out of my hands. So that just really struck a chord with me. And I think, the deeper I got into the quilting industry, the more I kind of realized, like, oh, this consumer is bullshit. We're just feeding capitalism, and like we're all in it, so we have to survive somehow. We can't just not participate. I mean, there are people that do it. Good for you. I'm happy for you, but some of us can't do that. So, like, I guess, like, where in like that story of like digging into the history of things did it shift, like, what am I trying to ask? Like, where was your relationship with the quilting industry before kind of digging into that history, and like how was it,
Yeah.
like a gradual shaping, or was it like a very violent turn of like how you viewed it? That was a
Yeah. I
lot.
mean,
I'm sorry.
no worries. No, that was awesome. One, first, thank you for sharing that because that's a story that I heard countless times when I was doing interviews for the podcast.
Hmm.
For your listeners, like we did the podcast interviews all ahead of time. So all of the interviews have already been done. There are over 30 interviews now. And then we compile them almost like a quilt, like a bit of a patchwork into a variety of different themes and episodes. And you can pick it up, anywhere you want, you know.
Yeah.
And where you picked it up, and what we just spoke about was the episode 6, the memory and grief episode. And that's a story I heard time and time again, which is I have used the clothes of people who have passed or people who have died or people who have been killed or murdered
Hmm.
to make a garment. And if you look at the AIDS quilt, it's filled with garments. It's filled with the clothes of people who passed.
Right.
This was my father's tie. This was my shirt. If you're reading this panel, I'm dead. And so it's poignant, so as we were constructing sort of Art Against Empire, which is an exploration of the politics and history of art and craft. And we
Hmm.
did this really intentionally, which is I find a lot of art and political quilting spaces, to answer your question more directly, abstent politics entirely. And in fact, they they overtly exclude politics that are not overtly patriotic or
Hmm.
potentially even conservative. And that
Hmm.
is a US Canadian phenomenon. I just want to call that out. That's a North American thing because it isn't like that everywhere. And
No.
so to me, I started thinking, well, and it's not like that in places like obviously Zach Foster's Quilty Nook, where I'm a part of, or I know it's not a part of Libs Elliott Sew Squad and other online and digital spaces, not part of this podcast.
No.
But every now and then, people from outside of this podcast listen in and then they hit that one rating and they leave a really nasty note that says, I wish you would leave the politics out of quilting. And to me, that's the sort of thing that exactly, I get so frustrated with it. And I'm like, well, politics, like, how do you do that? That's impossible. It's textiles. So,
Right.
like massive credit to all of the academics and the theorists and the authors. And I'll give you a whole reading list of all of these incredible books that inspired me.
Yeah.
But a lot of them were these kind of broad overviews. And they did this other thing, which is they separated art and craft.
Hmm.
And I'm just like, well, how are you doing that? I know why you're doing it. It's misogynistic. It's because, it's a craft until a man decides it's art. Okay.
Hmm.
Like, That sucks. I didn't come up with that line, by the way. I also
Yeah.
just recently saw it on a sweater, like knit in, and I'm
Knitting.
obsessed. So,
Yeah.
you know, I'm like, how do I put something out there into the world that helps people contextualize to do exactly what you did, which is to say, hey, that's me. Wait a
Hmm.
minute. That is me. So for
Yeah.
the memory and grief episode, we open it with a bit of a soliloquy from Judith Butler, the incredible philosopher Judith Butler, to anchor us to say, hey, wait a minute, grief itself is required to recognize that life exists.
Hmm.
And that, like, whoa, a quilting podcast philosophy, what are you doing? And I mean, like, I don't want to shy away from it because I work and hang out with the most brilliant quilting minds around. And what we're talking about as we're quilting, as has always been the case, is political.
Yeah.
Like it's not different than the abolitionist fairs, 1830s, 1860s, where we've got women stitching anti-slavery poems. They're selling them to fund abolitionist causes. You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's not dissimilar to these things. Queen Liliuokalani, 1893 or so. We have a whole bunch of American henchmen, businessmen who basically overthrow and take over Hawaii,
Yeah.
take it over, put her in her castle, and she stitches, documenting Hawaiian culture. Her first panel says, imprisoned at the Iolani Palace. We begin the quilt here. It's a story quilt.
Yeah.
Quilting has always been political. And then, if we really want to get super meta about it and even more philosophical,
Hmm.
there is a myth that exists within quilting. It's called the economy origin of quilting. We haven't quite got to it in the podcast yet, but there's
Mm.
this idea that quilting exists because little tiny scraps of fabric needed to be saved because they were so precious. And then poor people and all the people of all the kingdoms around the world put them together and made beautiful quilts. And we've passed down this through generations upon generations. And it's false. That doesn't exist. That's not real. That's
Mm.
fake. The actual history of quilting is that it's a luxury craft. It wasn't little tiny bits of pieces. It was giant whole cloth quilts made by and for luxury. And it
Hmm.
continues to be a luxury item right up until cotton is so-called democratized on
Mm.
the back of enslaved people.
Yeah.
So what? So quilting has never been not
Mm.
political. When I take a
Yeah.
look at antique quilts and we venerate these quilts, we walk through, so these quilts are amazing. And I look at the dates on the quilt, I think to myself, okay, well, slavery hasn't been abolished by that point. So potentially the entirety of this quilt was actually made by African American hands,
Hmm.
enslaved people.
Hmm.
From the batting, which needed to be woven, literal woven. That's how the ancient batting was made, to the cotton itself, to the mills that they were, all of it. So it's
Yeah.
all the product of politics, and it's not good politics at that point.
No. Yeah. Yeah.
And then it does become good politics. It becomes abolitionist quilting bees. It becomes the AIDS memorial quilt. It becomes
Hmm.
these things that are inspiring.
Yeah.
You know, it becomes the
Yeah.
Grenfell Women's Peace banners. It becomes, yeah, I was on the Greenpeace board for many, many years. It becomes the giant banners we unfurl and block roads with, all of those types of things. These textiles, these things are all connected in my brain anyway.
Yeah.
So I was like, how do I get that out there? So, I mean, we make podcasts. Secret Agents is my husband and I's company, and he has produced beautiful podcasts for lots of different people. He has his own called Queer Legends, and he's been bugging me to get back into this world for a very long time. I spent 8 years on TV as a political pundit,
Hmm.
and he harassed me until I did a podcast. I'll be honest. I love him dearly, and we get to work together on it. It's our very first time creatively working on something. So
Mm.
to work through all the amazing, like weird creative tensions that creatives have, but as husbands who've been married 20 plus years now. So it's a lot of fun. Like it is very fun to build a quilt like product with my husband who can't quite fathom why I chop up the really nice fabric into tiny little pieces like a crazy human.
Yeah.
But like, and just like sew it all back together. Like, he's like, why are you doing this? And then he sees the final product. He's like, that's incredible. I love it. And we've
Yeah.
actually even collaborated on a quilt as well. He once wandered into my studio and put up a bunch of linen pieces
Mm.
and scrap that I had got from a company here in Canada that does slow fashion. And
Mm.
he's like, that's the quilt. And I was like, great. Well, good luck. Sew it together, my love. He's like, no, no,
Yeah.
that's her job.
You're like,
So
no,
it is
no.
my job, but now the quilt's on our couch and it's a
Oh.
special piece of our world. So I think that's the other thing that quilting does really beautifully, to answer your question in a very roundabout way, which is, it is an infinitely flexible medium. So what works as an AIDS quilt also works as something you give someone in a hospice situation, and that's the story I told for myself in the memory and grief. And I think a lot of people have this same experience. I spoke with Grace Rother about it.
Hmm.
And when they and I spoke, I really thought I want people to know that, like I'm a real person, this host behind this thing. It's not just like a history podcast with like kind of, I don't know this person. I want to get to know them. And I
Right.
feel like a lot of people are compelled to make quilts in grief
Hmm.
because, I mean, one of the theses of this particular episode is that grief mimics the pace of textiles work,
Hmm.
especially textiles work as we know it today, which is oftentimes and can be meditative, can be slow. It takes a lot of stitches to get something done. Anybody who's so-called properly bound a quilt, don't get me started on that. I got hot takes on that bullshit too. Machine bind mine, folks. There you go. If you need permission to machine bind it the whole way, just
Yeah.
do it.
Just do it. Yeah.
Just do it. Just
Hmm.
do it. Um, so yeah, so that's kind of I'm glad that you're seeing yourself in it because I want, as people pick up each of the episodes for them to go, oh, hey, that I did not know that, or I didn't make that interesting connection. Um, or I didn't know that history, like, or I didn't think about it that way. But I also don't want people to feel bad about it. Like, I want to lift them up. Like, I mean, it's not your fault you didn't know. Like the
Right.
empire, that's why it's art against empire. It's because there are forces out there much larger than us that have absolutely zero F's to give about what you do or do not learn about in school, how well you learn it, so on and so forth. So we have all of these isms, racism, sexism, homophobia, all of this stuff that sits on top of us, preventing us from actually learning the things that the empire want us to learn. And one of those things is the very memory of people.
Hmm.
Who do we remember and why do we remember and how do we venerate them? I mean,
Hmm.
just look at monuments, just look at, like they are all kind of like white men of a
Yeah.
certain era, et cetera, et cetera. And when those monuments come down, who gets angriest? White
White
men
man
of
of
a
a certain
certain era.
age. Yeah. Yeah.
And then when they get back in power, they put them back up again. And ever such has been the cycle. This is
Hmm.
not new. Like I like, and again, that's my again. My husband jokes with me in the scripts. He's like, Ian, you can't say this is not new anymore. But I mean, because this is like I say it all the time because this
Right.
isn't new. Like, wait a minute, stop. And we did this in Canadian politics too. When I was a television pundit, I would every now and then be like, well, this is just like when Charles Tupper did it in 1860. And people like, shut up, stop saying that. No one cares. And I'd be like, well,
You
actually,
should,
I
though.
got a lot of emails.
Yeah.
Viewers care. I mean, I was on that show for 8 years. It was very popular and viewers care. So I also had a hunch that like when you tie these things together for the first time for folks,
Yeah.
little fireworks go off. And I'm like, that's all I want. I want you sitting there weaving, quilting, doing whatever you're doing. And you go, oh,
Yeah.
interesting. I didn't know about Social Justice Sewing Academy, or maybe you did. And now this is the push over the edge for you to actually finally contact the incredible Cerro Trails organization, and say, hey, I would like to help long arm a quilt for you. I would like to help embroider a block for you. I would like to help lift up these voices that I didn't know your organization existed. And that's also why we intentionally made it as global as possible. So we're
Hmm.
talking to people from the United Kingdom, Australia, Africa, here in Canada, the United States. We really thought, like, how do we make this broader than just textiles and quilting?
Hmm.
So yeah, that's what we're up to. And yeah, so there you go.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I love all of it. I love all of it because I think coming from the education space, like I was an elementary educator for 8 years. And so uh, I lived, breathed, and died third grade. And I have lived in this town my entire life. And as a third grade teacher, it was my job to teach the history of our town because it's local. You focus local. And I learned so much stuff about my very own little town that it's not little town, but that I did not know before. And it changed how I see where I live. And I think like you were saying, pulling in historical facts and pulling in like this is just like this thing that already happened and we're doing it again because we didn't learn our fucking lesson the first time. Like that kind of made me go, oh, like we're really doing this, aren't we? We're really stifling people's access to learning so that the people in power can just keep doing what they've always done. And I think part of it made me a great teacher, and part of that made me a really bad teacher. And, ultimately I left the profession for a myriad of reasons, but I just think that sense, and with, my neurospiciness, I am very justice sensitive and always have been. And that's why organized religion just did not work for me because I was always like, that's wrong. And I'd get in trouble because people were behaving one way and saying opposite things, and I would call it out and I'd get in trouble. So I was like, well, this isn't for me because I don't know what the heck. Like, I'm just not good at this, I guess. And so, anyway, I guess, and then to point out, like, what we're doing is grabbing little bits of what we can to tell the story of people's lives that existed. And, oh, okay. I remember what I was going to say. So working on that mass shooting quilt, it's a bunch of, if anybody doesn't know, you can look on my Instagram. You can go to Erin Bush and Caprera's. It's at Seam Ripper Society. They are tally blocks, and she uses the gun violence archive. I think you mentioned in your grief episode 6, and we are documenting the mass shootings that happen in the United States, and we're still working on 2024. The first 2 panels are being shown at an art show in where's Indiana? Grant? No, what's it called? I'll think of the name or the city. But anyway, I have the 3rd panel in my possession, and there's still one more to be constructed just for 2024. And the first 2 panels are at least a twin size, if not larger. And that was just for the first half of the year. So there's plenty of material to go around. And anyway, so Erin's idea was to document this because she's like, how do we visually represent what's actually happening? Because we hear statistics, and you mentioned this in that episode, like you hear numbers, you hear stats, people, and my husband and I always talk about this. We're in the pickle we're in because there's 2 problems in our nation, in our world. People don't understand statistics, and our mental health is very, very poor. So not only is there no personal responsibility, there's also a very big gap in knowledge and understanding how statistics work and what numbers mean, because we end up in a world, in a cycle of like, oh, I hate math, I'm bad at math. When you hear that your whole life, your own teachers are saying, well, I'm not good at math. So it's like, you have to be good at math to be a teacher, though. Like, you have to say, anyway, ooh, that's a whole different soapbox. Anyway, so what I'm trying to actually say is, like, working on that quilt has been so interesting, or that series of quilts has been interesting because it's like not enough for some people. Why aren't you putting their names on the tallies? Why aren't you, what you should do, it's like, why don't you do something then? Why don't you pick up your needle and thread and do that thing? Why are you asking me to do it? I came into the project late. I'm not making the blocks. I'm long arming it, but my part is adding the fury, the fury through words onto the quilt itself. And it's intentionally done in white thread so that it will fade into the background, like as if I was writing on the page of a journal. So hopefully it has that effect. Hopefully people see that kind of the echoes of the words, because it feels like we're just screaming them into a void. And we can write it down, we can say it, we can make political art pieces, and yet the powers that be are still in charge, and they're still allowing at least the United States to basically have free reign and unfettered access to weapons of mass destruction, assault rifles and things like weapons that have no business being in the hands of individuals. And the trope that liberals are anti-gun, like I I don't want anybody's I don't want to like step on the Second Amendment at the same time as understanding that there is a heavy, heavy responsibility when exercising that right.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm like
Yes.
word vomiting. I'm just like, sorry. I'm so sorry.
Okay.
None of it sounds very cohesive, but I just think it's like you can have this idea and you can have this creative energy and you want to do something, you want to put it out there. And then we're in this weird space where it's like, it's never enough for some people. And so I don't know if you butt up against that as well, or if that's something that you've talked with, like you said, you've completed all these interviews, if that has come up against some of the people you've chatted with who are more well known in the space. But it just seems like such an annoying piece of it. Like, then you do something. Like, this is what I can do. This is what I am doing. What are you doing?
I think it's always been this way. I mean, I've been an
Yeah.
activist for a long time, so and
Yeah.
this does not surprise me. And I think that all sides of the political equation have folks within their ranks who are much more comfortable criticizing from within and
Mm-hmm.
criticizing one another. So for listeners, if that's something that you're experiencing in your space, or maybe a book recommendation for you too, is Adrienne Marie Brown's "We Will Not Cancel Us." Like, it is a fantastically, wonderfully, are like just like one of the absolute best books I've ever read about how within movements we can't be constantly correcting every single little thing, because if that's what we are doing, then that's exactly what's allowing the empire, as I frame it, or kind of the right wing, or
Mm-hmm.
anybody who's attempting to oppress, to win, because that's what they want you to do. I mean, the
Right.
CIA literally put out a manual about how to mess with left-wing organizations, and it said, you want to promote internal debate. It was one of the
Mm-hmm.
number one things to do, because if people are debating the right way to recycle, well, then they're not worrying about the smelter down the road, right? Like, and that's kind of in the 1960s frame. We're in the very same frame right now. There's a reason why the right-wing politicians of the world seek to distract us by renaming arts centers. It's not because
Mm-hmm.
they want the art center named after them, though they do. Let's be clear.
They do. Yeah.
They also want the distraction in the cover so that they can then kidnap a state, like a leader of a nation. Like,
Right. Right.
okay, so like these things don't go independently of one another. This is, in
Right.
fact, what Donald Trump and his entire advisors, all of these folks, want to do. But this is, again, this isn't new. This
Right.
is this is in politics we would call it flood the zone, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what they're seeking to do is put so much news out there so frequently that the bad news that is out there and is just lying underneath all of this
Mm-hmm.
is not as paid attention to.
Mm-hmm.
And that's exactly how they've been able to militarize half of Minnesota,
Right.
is because as they were doing all of these other things, very few people who didn't live in Minnesota noticed that somehow the entire state had been militarized.
Right.
State rights are gone. You literally have people who don't identify themselves arresting American citizens with absolutely no recourse, and the federal government in the United States says that they're immune
Yeah.
and they don't require warrants.
Right.
My
Yeah. They're being
okay.
encouraged to break into people's homes. Like,
Right. So
yeah.
tell me what's more important, the renaming of the art center and I mean, that's just one example, because it is also important, but they're doing this constantly. The Melania movie is another really good example. If we're laughing at Melania and we're laughing because Brett Rattenberg, so on and so forth, you
Right.
think that the very smart minds of the White House haven't sorted out that's exactly what the left is going to do, and they want us to do that, is laugh about it.
Right.
So screw it, just ignore it. Because the
Right.
more that we spend talking about it and dissecting it and spending our energy saying, oh my gosh, they only made $7 million on a $75 million film. Don't you see Brett Rattenberg and the Epstein files? Why do you think the images of Brett Rattenberg came out of the Epstein files? I sound like a conspiracy theorist, but
No, but it's
because they're coordinated, because I come from the world of politics. And what you do in
yeah.
politics, you sit down with a giant calendar. And I don't know if folks know this, but this is part of the reason I'm doing the podcast as well, which is we sit down with a giant calendar and we say, okay, when can we release things that's to the maximum benefit of us, to the minimal benefit of our opposition? And if there's bad things we need to announce, because you're a government, there's going to be bad things happen. Where do you
Right.
put it? You put it Friday at 5 o'clock, right before a long weekend.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Well, there's no media around. Why do you think these files keep dropping on Friday at 5 o'clock? I mean, this is the thing. Again, it's another trope, Friday at 5. But I think
Mm-hmm.
these tropes exist throughout all various industries as well. Like it's not just politics.
Yeah.
It's also the Paducah Quilt Show.
Right.
You're going to see a political quilt at the Paducah Quilt Show, the largest quilt show in the world. Good luck.
Right.
Good luck, right? Okay, so and then the dominant quilting industry in the United States of America is funded by conservatives, white conservative women,
Mm-hmm.
and therefore, if we think Tula Pink is famous, insert any one of the creators of the fabrics that they love and adore, because the number of people who love and adore those fabrics is way larger than we conceive as people who might be more in the modern quilt world, so on and so forth.
Right.
But that
Right.
modern quilt world is just a reasonable facsimile of Paducah with
Right.
a little bit more political quilts.
Right.
Okay, but wait a minute. It's all still built around the exact same capitalistic enterprise of constantly releasing new fabrics with new designs that I have to have, and then frankly not paying those designers nearly enough. And some of those lines, by the way, in both Paducah, wherever the modern quilt con happens to be, so all of these, like, again, I don't want to name exact brands, but y'all know who we're talking about. It's folks who release so much fabric with so many designers that how much money do you think the individual designers are making? Really?
Right.
Are they paid to be at these conventions, or do they have to be there for free? Again,
Right.
these are things your favorite quilt influencer isn't going to talk to you about because they can't. They literally have clauses in their contract that say, I'm non-disparaging, never allowed to talk about this, non-disclosure agreements, you name it. So,
Mm-hmm.
but ask yourself, like, do they look happy all the time? I mean, I've seen photos and images from QuiltCon where some of the folks who were behind these booths getting mobbed by people look like I did when I had to step away from being a public person in Ottawa and on TV. I hated it.
Mm-hmm.
And I can see that same look in some of these same folks, and I know why they're there. It's because that's how they're making their money. And as
Right.
part of the contract, they're mandated to be at these events.
Right.
Like, and some of these folks were not, were disabled
Mm-hmm.
as well. So during a variety of different COVID, like the moment these things came back, well, you're expected to go stand at a table in front of a bunch of people. Oh, and because you want photos with them, you shouldn't have a mask and so on and so forth. Like, again, I think I have so much compassion for the artists who are caught up in the capitalistic industry that is quilting.
Yeah.
Because again, it's just like none of this stuff is made stateside or shores, none of it. Absolutely none of it. So that's
No.
the other thing is like it's all caught up in very big industries. And then sometimes people's beloved, most favorite brands, guess what? They're going to get bought. A lot of my pride quilts are made with Kona fabric. I'm not buying Kona fabric anymore. Just not going to happen, folks. I'm sorry, but their parent company is the Missouri Star Quilt Company.
Yeah.
I'm not supporting that company for a variety of different reasons. And I'm happy to run through all of them.
Yeah.
But, like,
Yeah.
I'm not, it's just like, I can't make that trade-off in my world. So, now it's like, okay, well, I'll look for somewhere else for solids. And that got me thinking as well, that and the censorship of quilts at those other people that aren't SACWA, that go join SACWA, everybody. Cause I mean, they're the people who had the quilts censored by, the American Quilt, whatever association,
Yeah.
which is a for-profit company. That blew my mind. This entity that I think kind of, I don't know, is like, what are you doing? You're a for-profit corporation.
Yeah.
Oh, weird. And you're censoring quilts because you thought they looked like a woman's body part?
Like, why is that what you're thinking about?
What? Right? What?
And you decided that for everybody else. And now your weirdness is out there for everybody to see.
Multiple years after these things, these beautiful pieces of art, I should say, had been on display.
Yeah.
So, and again, I'll
Yeah.
get all the details for all of the listeners because it was, there's those moments within the quilting world that I was just like, what?
Yeah.
Like,
It's
what? I would see friends
flabbergasting.
in the Nook come back from QuiltCon and be like, I was standing in front of this incredible quilt commemorating somebody's, like loss of life to naloxone or something. And then behind
Fentanyl.
fentanyl, yeah, and
Mhm.
somebody behind me, obviously naloxone, say,
Fuck
yeah, to
fentanyl.
fentanyl. The funk fentanyl was about that, and a bunch of people were complaining that it had swear words on it and
Yeah.
that it wasn't appropriate for this and that. And I thought to myself, like, wake the fuck up.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
rural America is devastated by this.
Hmm.
Urban America devastated by this. Canada, the same thing. Yet
Right.
you're worried about the swear word on the quilt and the fact that the fonts don't match. Well, one, it's a group project. And
Yep.
two, it's so emotionally. I was just so happy to see it, frankly, in QuiltCon. I was just like,
Yeah.
I always click through the things on QuiltCon, the photos, and I'm just like, same, 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 same. Okay, same, same. Oh, and then I stop because I'm going
Hmm.
to be honest, it is a lot of the same. Like it's a
Yep.
lot. Like if you make bold, beautiful, bright quilts with solid colors and geometric shapes, I've got a very good chance, and they're technically perfect. You have a very good chance of getting into QuiltCon.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Not my. I love them. I think that's great. But
Yeah.
click, and then you say fuck fentanyl, and you're like, damn, who made this? Why?
Yeah. Yeah. It stops you.
Best quilt from QuiltCon last year, y'all, was the kid was in the youth category. It was this adorable like shark quilt thing that was
Hmm.
going on. Best. The
It was
absolute. Could
so
we just
cute.
do all kids? Like
Yeah.
only kids get to do QuiltCon, or all the quilts are allowed in QuiltCon.
Yeah.
It's like a festival of quilts. I mean, I don't know. I don't want to get down too much on QuiltCon, but I will say
Yeah.
it is a very good example of how privilege creeps into the quilting world and we don't
Hmm.
really recognize it. How much does it cost to go to QuiltCon?
It's
I'm
expensive, I
from
can tell you.
Montreal. I'm from Montreal. I'm a tech executive. It's expensive.
Yeah.
Okay. So like for me to get all the like, okay, so yeah, and relatively, so if you don't have my means,
Hmm.
how are you ever gonna get there, do those things? And then when you get there, you got to pay for the lectures.
Hmm.
Listen, I want them to get paid. Like
Yeah.
I don't know the exact trade-off, but it's not dissimilar to quilts itself. If you want to buy a quilt, you're in for thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
So we're making
Yeah.
luxury items at that point. I don't want to
Hmm.
make luxury items. I want to make things for my friends and my family. And I even maybe want to make things for people out there in the world that can afford them, but the economics of it doesn't make it practical. So if we
Right.
can understand that about quilts themselves and just extrapolate that now 5, 6 times to, how many times have you been to QuiltCon? Just asking. Like
Yeah.
maybe send someone else from your guild.
Yeah.
But we don't, that sounds devastatingly socialist, doesn't it though? Like, I mean, again,
It
I
does.
don't know, fair disclosure I'm probably the most left-wing guest you've ever had. Like I'm a full-on socialist, like a real one. Like Bernie Sanders is kind of right-wing in my world, right? I'm going to be honest. Like you said, you like the
Yeah.
Second Amendment. I was like, actually, I do want to take all their guns and all their bullets. And just
Sure.
like Eddie Murphy, I want to put a big old bullet tax in place. Massive one. I don't know. Like the Second Amendment was done like in a historical place where muskets were the guns. What is going on, y'all?
Yeah.
Like there's just a
Right.
bunch of things I think y'all should amend about the way that you do it. And and to me, it's just like, I don't know. The quilting spaces don't want to hear that though. Most of the time they get very
Yeah.
like, that's not what this is about. When I think to myself, well, that's what it's always been about. Again, like
Yeah.
Admiral quilts. I think about Harriet
Yeah.
Power quilts. I think about Civil War signature quilts. I think they've always been political. So we've always used this medium to say, hey, wait a minute, something's wrong.
Yeah.
So I think maybe the other thing that the quilting world could do is what is the solution? So
Yeah.
and I think that's like, so we're very good at pointing out, and a lot of political quilts are like, right now, fuck ICE. Okay,
Yeah.
great, fuck ICE, but also support your immigrant neighbors.
Right.
How
Yeah.
about support your immigrant neighbors rather than make a fuck ICE quilt?
Yeah.
Where's your fuck ICE quilt gonna go? Sorry, hot take, but I'm done with them. Like, unless that fuck ICE quilt is headed to the internet to be shown to the entire world or to a rally, or you're going to donate it somewhere, it's going to raise money. What's the next step?
Right.
You can make a pussy hat all you want, but if you don't think about that pussy hat being alienating to black women,
Right.
What are we doing? Okay, great. So there's the next step. What's the next step? So again, the red hats. Everybody's knitting adorable red ant. It takes a lot of time. Okay, well,
Hmm.
how about you go buy a red hat and volunteer for your immigrant neighbors?
Right.
I'm just again, I get just a hot take. Like
Right.
make
No,
a
it's
quilt for
it's
them and give them the quilt to stay warm. If you want to make a quilt, great, but they probably don't want to fuck ice quilt. Like who? Again, I creative
yeah.
expression as a way to say screw all of this, and I hate it. I love this. So I'm
Hmm.
not saying don't make the quilts, make all the quilts, make the
Right.
quilt block of the month, do all those things, but then make a plan for what's next. That's the political thing to do, right? So otherwise, I'm mad. I put it on my Instagram for my couple hundred friends and family. Not enough. And I think a lot of times we get tricked, and maybe this is also where you're going. Like people are then around the internet. Why didn't you put their names on? What about this? What about that?
Mhm.
I'll go one step, kind of be a little bit aggressive, frankly, sometimes, which is like, what are you doing next?
Yeah.
Who
That's
did
my
you call your
question.
representatives today? Because you
Hmm.
could do that while you're quilting. Boop, 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 boop.
Yeah.
They need to hear from you. Did you call the most reasonable members of the Republican Party? There are like three left. So like call them, give them some support. I don't know. Like again, like if you're coming at this from a different political space, but you're outraged about what's going on, either if it's in America, Canada, anywhere else, and you should be outraged. Because if you're
Hmm.
not outraged, you're not paying attention, as the saying goes, right? Which is like
Yeah.
why I get so worked up about it. Because yeah, a lot of the time it stops with that's it. And again, I come from at this from remembering also an era of AIDS ribbons. That's when I grew
Hmm.
up, in the 80s and 90s. I,
Yeah.
I just don't think a lot of those people didn't care. You
Yeah.
know, I think that kind of level of tokenism where you go, everybody cares. Well, everybody's wearing a ribbon. Okay, well,
What's that doing though?
but if conversely, or at the same time, if people aren't talking about this stuff right now and they do have a platform,
Hmm.
why aren't they?
It's a choice. Right.
That's a choice. That's a
Right.
choice. It's those people who should be making the fuck ice quilts, right?
Right.
But they're not. They're just busy putting out the beautiful geometric pattern, and it's busy getting anonymously juried into QuiltCon, and it will win QuiltCon right beside the political quilts, and that's why I've got a problem with this.
Hmm. Yeah.
Right? It doesn't make it. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, um,
Yeah.
yeah. Plus, also the fact that so many professionals compete against amateurs in quilting competitions blows my mind. I'm so confused by it. Like, if
Yeah.
what you do full time all the time is make quilt patterns, make beautiful quilts, so on and so forth, and then you enter those quilts into QuiltCon because you need to sell more patterns, so on. That's just part of this exact same industry.
Yep.
And almost all of those people also have a fabric line or potentially want a fabric line. They
Hmm.
want the influencer status, so on and so forth. And, before this interview, I looked at, 9 or 10 or 12, and about half of the people that I looked at definitely were like, the world's falling apart right now. What the heck are we going to do?
Hmm.
And the other half are absolutely silent. There are
Yeah.
no stories, there are no posts, there are no reels. And
Yeah.
friends, if those are the influencers you're following, that's how you check. There's your practical politics of the day. It's like, look on your Instagram feed and critically ask yourself, does this person share my values?
Hmm. Yeah.
And silence is violence. I don't know how else to say it. It's a saying that
Yeah.
came out of the African American rights movement. Silence is violence. If people are not talking about it, it probably means something.
Hmm.
I went through and fought for same-sex marriage in Canada, and we were the sixth country in the world to get it. And there were people who would not, politicians, friends of mine, who would not look me in the eyes.
Hmm.
They also wouldn't tell me they were voting against it, or they were about to walk into the Senate and vote against it.
Right.
So, like again, silence is violence. Like
Right.
I think specifically of my former friend, Senator Panna Merchant, who was my absolute best friend. Just great. What this young, wonderful staffer, just this guy's a great kid, so on and so forth. Senators in Canada, by the way, are appointed. And
Mm.
she was appointed because her husband was a significant fundraiser.
Mm.
And we got to spend some time at her house with the Minister of Canadian Heritage, who I was working for at the time. And then she realized I was gay, and that was still okay, right up until the point that same-sex marriage came. And I made some advocacy in her office, and she literally wouldn't commit either way. And I knew at that exact moment what she was going to do in the Senate. And as I was standing outside of the Senate chamber with my good friend Libby Davies, who was a member of Parliament at the time,
Hmm.
and actually went on to marry my husband and I, Panna came right out and looked me in the eye and just quickly put her head down and said, "I'm sorry," and she walked away quickly.
Mhm.
Do you know how many times people experience that, no matter whether they're like marginalized or not? They don't have to be standing outside the doors of the Senate. They just have to be sitting in a quilting guild and have somebody say, "No, we don't talk about that here.
Yeah.
Don't talk about that."
Right.
Or we do the Pledge of Allegiance here. Oh, you do? Hmm. What's that?
Interesting.
Common, really, really common across quilting guilds all across America. And when people
Mhm.
challenge it, as has just happened with a friend of mine in California,
Mm.
challenge it with a quilt. That's politics. That
Yeah.
make your quilts. Do it. But nobody's gonna like to me, it's just like because guess what? So many people get treated that way in so many of these spaces, or they're just not there.
Mhm.
It's only been recently that quilt conventions, all of them, have started thinking maybe we need room for folks who are neurodivergent and might need a quiet space
Mhm.
away from all of this. Maybe we need to have affinity spaces so folks can meet each other, but then they assign an affinity space and sometimes overlap the affinity group. So, like, all of the folks who are neurodivergent get to meet, but also the gay folks are meeting at the same time. So don't be both. You gotta
You can
choose.
only be one. Yeah.
Right. And in the
Yeah.
vast majority of fiber festivals, textiles festivals and other places, these things don't exist at all. So, I
Right.
do have to give credit to folks like QuiltCon and others for at least listening, starting the thing to put it in place. But, bluntly, the craft world is eons behind everybody else. Like if you go to a
Mhm.
Comic-Con, you're going to get a lot more accommodation. Like you're just going to be accommodated and it's
Right.
not hard and land will be acknowledged.
Mhm.
We will say whose land this was before. We'll honor those people, so on and so forth.
Mhm.
Like we're speaking right after the Grammys when Billie Eilish causes a storm to remind people that all the land that the vast majority, well, all of it is stolen.
Right.
And that is something that people definitely don't want to hear in quilting organizations and so on and so forth. And they also don't want to ever hear that quilting was a tool of oppression,
Right.
which is that in Indian boarding schools in the United States and here in Canada, they're called residential schools. Quilting was used as a literal tool of oppression to teach Indigenous women the domestic arts and
Mhm.
then judge them on their capacity and ability to do it by creating homemaker clubs that lasted when you then sent those women back to their reserves after stealing them from those reserves. So you take them away from their culture, you replace their culture, weaving, with
Mhm.
yours, quilting.
Mhm. Yeah.
So it's a tool of oppression. And people don't want to have that. Oh my gosh. I'm sure
Yeah.
people just click Ian off down. I don't want to feel bad about the thing that I do. And we shouldn't because
Right.
tools have now been reclaimed by those very same communities. If we look here in Canada, all across Anishinaabe country, you have
Mhm.
beautiful star quilts, the Lone Star pattern, which has been now expanded to 7 to represent each of the 7 sacred values. We
Mm.
have an organization here called Quilts for Survivors that if folks want to make a quilt for a residential school survivor, for an Indigenous person who survived this literal state oppression. Here in
Yeah.
North America, you can do that and they will put you directly in touch with that person. So to me,
Mm.
it's like, there are ways to just to say, acknowledge that, whoa, the form itself that we love so much isn't exactly what we thought it was. But
Right.
isn't that amazing? Because none of us are either. And it
Right.
goes back to that question of grief. Like, who
Mhm.
hasn't understood themselves better after going through loss?
Mhm. Right. You
Only
have to.
people who haven't done the work to start to repair themselves from grief.
Right.
Those people, I'm going to pick up some needle and a thread because it'll help. It really will. Like again, I
Right.
say that in the show a couple of times. The cloth will be there when you're waiting. I
Yeah.
really do mean it because I mean I think, and again, it's like those clothes that are in somebody's closet when they pass. And again, Mary Burgess, who was in that same episode, said
Yeah.
sometimes it takes people two years. It often takes people 2 years, commonly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Finally, say I want and we see the two reactions to that, though, as well, to grief and to these other things. I don't want any of this in my world. I can't handle it. Take it away from me. And people
Right.
do the same thing with politics. People
Mhm.
do the same thing with this knowledge that quilting was and can be harmful. Oh man, that sucks. And people are like, no, take it away from me.
Hmm.
That is white privilege. That's saying I can't handle it. I refuse to take on the emotions to just deal with that. I refuse to reconcile that within myself. No. Okay, well, great. Well, then you're gonna still
Right.
make quilts, and I got nothing else to say. I'm not gonna help. But maybe they'll listen to another couple episodes of Art Against Empire or your
Yeah.
podcast, or they're gonna meet somebody at the Quilt Guild who says, "Look at my quilt," and it says "Price,"
Hmm.
and they go, "Oh my God, wait a minute, this is real. Politics is real." Because again, I never want to write anybody off forever.
Right.
Right. I want to be able to lift people up and be like, okay, what's next? What's next? Okay, that did not work. What's next? So yeah, I don't know. You must have
Yeah,
a question too.
I do. I have some
I just
questions.
rambled a lot for
No,
you.
it's great. So I am going to QuiltCon. I
Yeah.
have I've quilted two quilts that got in that were juried in. So that's
Yeah.
exciting. But also I do understand what you're saying about the fact that like it's because they're so clean and the lines are so crisp and the piecing was immaculately done by the quilt makers themselves. And then I quilted on top of that, which was great. And I know that that contributed to the overall visual effect, which thank you so much. I will accept my accolades. But also, I stood in front of that fuck fentanyl quilt because I in contact with some of the makers of it, and they're dear friends of the podcast and of me, and I love them. And so I stood and I held space for that quilt because the woman who started it lost her daughter to a fentanyl overdose, if anybody didn't know. And then to hear these privileged white conservative biddies walking past it and going, how dare they use that language? And before I could turn around and say, have you lost someone to this devastating drug that is out in the streets and killing people all the time? Someone else did it for me. Like I didn't have to because someone else did. And I just watched it happen because I was like, yeah, this needs to be said and it needs to be witnessed and acknowledged that like we are calling each other out in these spaces, which I love because you're right. It is very easy to walk through these aisles of pristine quilts that say nothing. It's they're representations of that person's creativity. And some of them do stop me in my tracks and make me go, oh my God, I never thought to use those materials that way. I love that for them and for me and for everybody else who gets to experience that. But it's the ones that make you go, whoa, what is that about? Those are the important ones and very often don't make it in. And and again, going back to, my dear friends, Aaron and Alicia and Emily, they collaborated on a map quilt that used the challenge colors of QuiltCon from 2025, and it was about the colors represented how far one would need to travel in the U.S. to access abortion care, and it didn't make it in. And there was no text on the quilt; it was just the map and the colors, and the explanation was in the artist statement. That didn't get in, and I think you know, it is what it is. It was sad, and at the end of the day, it's hanging in that same show with the mass shooting panels that are completed in Fort Wayne, Indiana. I knew I would remember it. Um, but they're just so far and few between the ones that really speak to that. And I think you're right. I think we need to have a quilt show of just kids quilts. I think we need to have a quilt show of just political quilts. Like and it
I
is
want
so
a quilt show of all the sexy quilts,
oh my
all of
God.
the sexual quilts, all of the quirky ones,
Yeah,
the ones that make noise and move and I can wear.
right.
And I want quilts to be more than just something that's three
Pretty.
layer stitching through it, so on and so forth, and
Right.
perfect. Again,
Right.
there's a reason that we have a show that we started off the whole series with, a whole meditation on perfection and how to break
Yeah.
out of that cycle with Kim Worker, who's an amazing crafter, and she's a crocheter who's made crochet patterns. She knows how to be perfect, but she
Yeah.
also created Mighty Ugly. I did want to acknowledge the What We Will Use as Weapons, a list of school supplies by Ginny Robinson, which
Yes.
QuiltCon a number of years ago, a stunning quilt.
Yes.
We'll again post a photo of it. On one side of it, it had a large gun, like a weapon, I think, and then on the other
An
side, all of
AR-15.
an AR-15,
Hmm.
and then on the other side, it had all of the things that educators and teachers could use to protect themselves, up to and including like a bowling ball and a trophy. And it was a heart-wrenching quilt and beautifully rendered. And I don't want to yuck anybody's yum about QuiltCon. What I'm trying to say about
Right.
these
Right.
types of things, contests themselves, is that they have an origin, which
Right.
is to say when we start to rank the domestic arts and when we start to say this is and America has y'all, as a Canadian, I am not one of the Canadians who's mad at America right now. Rest assured, I love America. Y'all, you have your ups, you have your downs, you have your republic. You'll balance yourselves out, please. At some point soon, it would be helpful. But here's the thing, like I love America, but I think you also have a very competitive culture. Like I
Right.
think there is a
Absolutely.
culture of county fairs that exists here in Canada, but it is nowhere near what it is in the States. I heard like the Minnesota County Fair is like the place for quilts to be,
Yeah.
and it's like 3 doors down from the livestock folks. I love this, but that's not a construct that the rest of the world understands. So then
Right.
when it's distilled into something like Paducah or QuiltCon,
Yeah.
it can feel that kind of othering of like, well, wait,
Right.
like, why did all these quilts get rejected? So I have some solutions if anybody from the Modern Quilt Guild Board wants to listen. Solution number one, stop allowing so many people to apply with so many quilts. That doesn't make sense. One person, one quilt made last year, done.
Hmm.
Okay, that's it. Second year you can put it in, maybe. But this whole idea that you can put in a quilt that you made 3 years ago and it's going to go in along with another, what it was like 4 or 5 submissions or whatever. Each of those has cost. Now you're deferring that cost to the artist themselves, which frankly,
Right.
these kind of and everything costs, even in SAQA, you're gonna this many applications for this amount of dollars. And I get it. These
Right.
organizations fund themselves.
Right.
Understood. But maybe if we brought the number down, then the judges would have a more reasonable number to judge as well. And then
Hmm.
you have a shot. That's it. That's all. It's even more special. Or you go the opposite way, friends. You go the Festival of Quilts Europe and you book
Right.
a slightly larger space because you can sell it, friends. Like they're
Right.
artificially keeping the space small. That's why
Hmm.
lectures sell out and so on and so forth. It's a question of supply and demand. I understand
Hmm.
it. You don't want to be any bigger, but maybe the right thing to do is hang more quilts, not less or fewer quilts.
Yeah.
One last big element is pro-am. There is a fundamental problem at play when the quilting industry is dominating these awards, whether it's through individual makers or not. Did they pay for the fabric? Did they pay for the thread?
Hmm.
Did they even sometimes pay for the long arm they made it on? I mean, this is not unreasonable to suggest that not some of, but the top quilt influencers in the world didn't pay for any of those things.
Right.
None of them. It got all gifted to them by these brands so that they would be an ambassador and they would be an artisan. And I got a year's worth of thread to use.
Right.
Okay, so now the privilege continues to compound itself and it's right there on the wall. So, of course, these quilts are going to be better.
Yeah.
Like I'm a quilter. I know that. Yes, everybody's like, Ian, with $100 Singer and stuff you get from Fabricland here in Canada, which is like the one that closed Joann's in the States,
Joanne's.
make
Yeah.
an award-winning quilt. Yeah, you can, but
You
it's
can.
easier to own a cotton. Come on. It's just
Right.
crisp. It has the sizing in it. it.
Right.
It's got a better thread count. Don't
The
bullshit me
colors are
here.
better.
The
Yeah.
colors are better and they're
Yeah.
more familiar to the judges.
Hmm.
That familiarity, that aesthetic preference is yet again another layer of privilege that's
Right.
been layered onto all of this. And frankly, until a couple of years ago, like the past 2 years of QuiltCon judging have actually been relatively good. They shook it up a bit. Like Heidi
Hmm.
Parks won a quilt. I saw that was
Hmm.
controversial though. That quilt was controversial.
Hmm.
What's wrong with the quilting world that they can't put more Heidi Parks quilts and Zach Foster quilts? I think that was a duo on their one. Put
Hmm.
more of those in those shows. Oh, because
Right.
they're controversial. And I saw TikToks by again leading quilt influencers like mocking other people's quilts.
Right.
So y'all, it is an industry. And that's part of what again the show I want to do. And part of what I do in the quilting world is to say, hey, let's break it down. Let's break down this and be like, actually, you
Yeah.
just have to go to the thrift store. You don't even need a rotary cutter.
Mm-mm.
Guess what? Rotary cutters didn't exist before this, whatever, the 60s or the 70s. Y'all, scissors work just fine. They're very, very good at, so you don't need all of those things. But slowly but surely you can build all those things. Everybody can be a quilter.
Right.
And more interestingly for me, everybody especially can be a narrative quilter. And
Right.
I think that really the power of quilting, a lot of what we've been talking about today is is sort of like so I make a lot of quilts that are wearable, like stoles or capes or things. It's my Colors of Pride series. And they
Hmm.
are bright and they're colorful and they only have 3 or 4, 5 pieces of fabric in them. And oftentimes people have said to me, like, oh, is that the back of the quilt? And I'm like, no, that's the whole thing. That's
Yeah.
it. Because again, it's made to be worn. It's made as a collection that's going to go to a drag queen story time and hopefully be destroyed. Because
Hmm.
I believe in the sort of they're it's a renewable resource. Like, well, I don't know why we treat them so preciously. Again, maybe that's my whole kind of ethos as well around quilts, which is very different than other people. Is I
Hmm.
want you to have sex on my quilts. Like I want you to be like fucking on my quilt. I want you to get dirty and have your
Yeah.
kid accidentally get the poop on the baby quilt because that's awesome. Like
Yeah.
the last thing I want is somebody to be like, "Oh my God, I put your quilt in a closet and because it was so beautiful." And we only bring it out at Christmas or we only bring it out at this time. Unless it's a Christmas quilt, which I have made several. Um,
Hmm.
all year, use it up. So again, with my sort of series of Pride color series, I'm kind of poking at the modern quilt industry. I've made gores, which is like a classic dress shape, and I've just rearranged the gores into kind of a vaguely aesthetic thing that actually then makes a cape or a stole or something that you
Hmm.
can then wear. And my whole idea around it is like, again, I want to make technically perfectly beautiful quilts. Yeah. And most of them are, although I do machine bind the entire thing. Again, permission to
Same.
do it. That's right.
Yeah.
All that hand
Yeah.
sewing, I got arthritis. I can't handle that.
Yeah.
So
Same.
right? I'm like, well, not my thing. So to me, I also wanted to say, no, rip it off the wall. I don't want it on the wall. I want it on your baby. I want it on the ground. I want you to
Hmm.
sit on it. And then I want to have to collect them up after the drag queen story time and realize, oh, my construction wasn't so good on that one. I better go
Hmm.
fix that. I need to patch it. I need to mend.
Right.
And that is where the economy of quilting does come in. It
Hmm.
may not be the origin of quilting. Quilting was a luxury all the way up until, it wasn't. And then unfortunate and terrible shit happened in history. And again, that's kind of the ethos of the podcast, but we're going to get past that. We're going to understand it. We're going to process it.
Right.
And then we're going to make quilts that help uncover it, like Stephen Towns, who's my first feature artist, who makes
Hmm.
incredible quilts that, again, uncover these difficult places in American history, uh,
Yeah.
slave rebellions, and also joyous places in American history, like the place in Florida, Paradise Falls, where it was a segregated vacation space. So he's reimagined these. His work at Falling Water. All of this helps reinterpret what quilts can be and who they're for. So yeah, to
Yeah.
me, it's like that's what I'm interested in is like tell a story with your quilt. How can you tell a story with your quilt? And if you're not going to tell a story with your quilt, is it going to keep somebody warm? And if it's not doing either of those things,
Right.
okay, I'm cool with it. I mean, but give it to somebody to keep them warm at some point. Like I heard from a friend of mine that they purchased a QuiltCon quilt and they sleep under it every night and they don't want to tell anybody.
I
And
would
I
be
was like,
like, look what's
fair.
on my bed.
Right? I would be like, look what's on my bed.
Yeah.
But also fair, like because they don't want it's like people who probably, paint antiques who get that same backlash online. There's just this idea that it should be left pristine, that you don't want to snag it, that you don't want to create a problem with.
Right.
And to me, again, I see them as like, yeah, they're renewable. It's a renewable resource and it's a consumable object, at
Hmm.
the same time. So like consume your quilts, just do stuff with your quilts. Throw them in
Yeah.
the back of the car if you think that they're ugly and they're going to keep you warm if your car breaks down. Whatever, who cares? It's better
Right.
than what I see a lot of times, which is like, well, I put them in a closet and or on the quilt rack, the dreaded quilt rack. The quilt rack
Yeah.
should only be used for drying the quilts, then put the quilts on the bed, roll them up.
Hmm.
Anyway, I got lots of opinions.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I'm with you. And I do want to go back to the my brain just went blank. The quilt you mentioned, the QuiltCon quilt.
What we will use as
What we'll
weapons?
use as weapons. Yes. Okay. So that was the best of show quilt, my first QuiltCon. So Raleigh
2024.
2024. And I lost my shit because one of the big, ooh, I might get emotional. One of the big reasons I left teaching was I and I've since been through lots of therapy for it, and I still work on it all the time, but I have an issue with safety, feeling safe. And I never felt safe. And um it just broke me down year after year having to stare at these little 8-year-olds and tell them, I'll put my body in front of yours. And I would, you know, but why should I have to do that? And I reference the Second Amendment because that's the government I live under. And do I agree with it? No, because yes, they were muskets at the time that you had to load one bullet at a time. And sure, you could protect your home and property, but like, why haven't we evolved past that? So ultimately, I think that we should not have to have that. And I don't think that guns are necessary. So that being said, that really shook me, and in a terrible way and in an awesome way. And so I do want to just, again, because I've said it multiple times, say thank you to the people who put themselves out there to make those pieces that resonate. And the one that there was another quilt that year uh, that was again a silhouette of an AR-15, and then the names of all of the, I think it was from the Uvalde shooting, all the names of the children that were killed in red around the gun. Ripped me to pieces. I just thought about all the little kids in my room and like my own boys, like how devastating that is. That's why I felt so passionate about being part of the mass shooting quilts, because I'm like, yeah, this is fucked up. It is so fucked up that we walk around just thinking in the back of our minds at all times that we could just be gunned down because somebody has really bad mental health and access to a weapon that can take people's lives. Okay. And I lost my train of thought of what else I was going to say because there are so many things to be talked about. But let's see, what was the last thing that you were saying?
Just really briefly about that quilt before we move on. It has actually been acquired by the International Quilt Museum, and it was acquired at the show. I don't know if listeners, many of them probably know that. I really look forward to them showing it, and I think this is, I love the International Quilt Museum. I think they do the most incredible work. So this is no tea, no shade, as we say in the gay world, against them at all.
Yeah.
But there is a certain, I paused. That's really interesting because I really don't want to hurt their feelings, but there is a certain violence in archiving these types of things.
Right.
So quickly.
Yeah.
Right. So, and like I live in the world of archives. I spend a lot of time in archives. I spend a lot of time thinking about archives, and I just inherently, they are quite violent places. Like the things you stumble across, you're going to experience and see things that are racist, that are homophobic, that are all of these types of things. Especially when, like me, I'm a queer researcher, I seek out homophobic things. So, but what is very interesting about this particular piece is that it's so new, and then it's in a museum vault.
It's swept away, yeah.
And I was like, could it go on tour? Because it's the size of a classroom door.
Right.
The through line to the AIDS quilt is direct.
Right.
Right. The size of the AIDS quilt panels is the size of a grave.
Right.
3x6.
Yep.
This is the size of a door. This is, again, this through line is right there. That through line is absolutely right there. And again, AIDS quilt would not have happened without, Harriet Powers quilt, so on, all of these various, all of the things that happened before it. But this is the through line directly to this one. So yeah, I think about all of those other quilting spaces in the world where this would never be shown.
Right.
Even though that this is the predominant violence issue in America right now. Most certainly not, no one's illegal. Most certainly not people who refuse to respect a state border.
Right.
It's this. So that is, again, part of the reason I put out the podcast, part of the reason that I make banners, part of the reason that I am political, part of the reason that I'm willing to like fart in the quilt guild room, not literally. I mean, sometimes probably, but anyway, that I'm willing to say these things out loud is because I think somebody's got to do it. Somebody's got to, because this, again, this quilt should be on tour. Like this quilt should go to literally every single place there is a shooting of this nature, and be put right beside the podium of an anti-gun violence organization that says, look at this thing.
Right.
Like, look at this. Like, do you know how long this quilt took one person, Ginny Robinson, to make? but how many other incredible women, men, non-binary folks it touches?
Right.
Like, and also how much somebody like Ginny Robinson would have had to take on to make that quilt, to then put it in the show, and then to get all of the hate mail and to get
Right.
the negative comments and all about something that again is an issue that has been fundamentally politicized, like we talked at the beginning of the episode, to
Right.
distract you. You know, gun rights is the OG distraction in American politics. It
Yeah.
always has been, because nobody's ever needed to kill anybody any faster.
Right.
Good. We're good. All the
Yeah.
guns that are available here in Canada could be available in the United States. Y'all could kill each other just the same. But guess what? A lot slower.
Right.
Way slower. You know, like, and so to me, it's never been a question about gun rights. Should I have a gun? Yeah, I've got tons of hunter friends. I have tons of indigenous friends. They have guns. Great. They're all very responsible with them. This is about something very different than that,
Right.
which is the state using the ignorance and the refusal to control something as a wedge in politics. You know, another one of those political things we spin doctors love to do, which is how do we separate people? How do we wedge them apart?
Yeah.
They wedged America so far, America can't talk to each other.
Right.
And then the ultimate expression of that is this outburst in ultra violence that occurs.
Right.
Not good. Not good on either side as well. Like, we cannot also on the left be venerating Luigi Mangiani. We can't kill people because we don't like their politics. We can't. So again, I'm happy to be controversial on both sides of this as well. Like,
Right.
we
Yeah.
can't venerate this on either side. You
Yeah.
know, I come from the world, again, like I said, I was on the Greenpeace board for many, many years. I come from a pacifist activist tradition, which is why I
Yeah.
love banners and quilts that say things. And that's why I want those quilts passionately to get outside. So that's why I want you
Yeah.
to put your ice quilt on your house, put it out, get it out there, because these
Yeah.
pacifist acts, one by one by one by one by one, all mount up. And
Right.
this isn't new. Like I like to say, like at the very beginning of Art Against Empire, there's a reason I talk about Gandhi. We all love Gandhi. Everybody loves Mahatma Gandhi, don't they?
Mm-hmm.
They don't realize Mahatma Gandhi was a radical.
Mm-hmm.
He's a radical who refused to allow the British to clothe him any longer. Why? You know, Mahatma Gandhi walked around in khadi, homespun cloth. And that's the
Yeah.
image we all have of him. You think Mahatma Gandhi, you don't think of the Mahatma Gandhi who traveled to South Africa as a lawyer in a business suit. If you want to see that
No.
one, you can watch the Ben Kingsley epic. Because there's so many different Mahatma Gandhis, but the one you remember is the one with homespun khadi.
Right.
They still make in India. And again, it was a direct rejection of British colonial rule that destroyed the textiles industry. Said, you guys, the most advanced textiles industry in the world, by the way. You know, Paisleys were stolen from India. You know, the
Mm-hmm.
Paisley design originated as a pomegranate design in the Middle East. Those weavers were in India. Those colonized, brought to Paisley, England, renamed the Paisley, and they're still on our quilts today. So, like,
Mm-hmm.
even the motifs are political fundamentally.
Yeah.
And again, there's a reason I started all with Mahatma Gandhi, because we all love Mahatma Gandhi, but when we listen to really what he had to say about pacifism and nonviolence, he recognized very quickly that spinning khadi, slow, methodical act, and wearing it and bringing it into your life could in fact be the very cultural push that an entire nation needed to free itself from colonialism, so much so that it's on the Indian flag. You know, if you
Yeah.
look at the Indian flag, that's the spinning wheel is right in the middle of it.
Mm-hmm.
That's why. You know, so it's like the textiles are powerful, powerful stuff. So to me,
Yeah.
it's like, America, you got this. Make your quilts, weave, talk to one another while you're doing it. Don't do it alone.
Mm-hmm.
Refuse to allow your quilt guild spaces to be apolitical.
Yeah.
That's not a thing. It never has been a thing. So you set aside, it's February when we're doing this one, set aside some time, even if it's a room full of white people, to honor Black History Month and talk about Black women who quilted from not just Gee's Bend, folks, everywhere throughout history.
Yeah.
Look, and if no one in your guild knows that, then somebody should. Take it
Right.
on, take on that work to bring that history, because the Smithsonian's got it for you. Here in Canada, the Museum of Canadian History, the British Museum, the V&A, they've done this work for you. So send
Mm-hmm.
around a reading, have a conversation about it. Because again, like, there are actual very practical things we can do in craft spaces to say, hey, I have more than enough. I'm going to send it to the Social Justice Sewing Academy. I'm going to send it to Susan Hudson at the Navajo Quilters. I'm going to say, y'all, how much fabric do we all have?
So
The
much.
first thing every single one of us could do is send a bunch of fabric to Quilts for Survivors, or I could keep listing them here.
Yeah.
They're countless. So the reason that you haven't done it yet is because you're thinking, oh, I might need that. I have to have it. I'm going to hoard it. I'm going to keep it. Who else
Hmm.
does those things? The empire.
Hmm.
So to me,
Right.
I'm constantly looking at ways in my own practice now, especially since we've been doing the doc, like how do I share? How do I become
Hmm.
more abundant? How do I work in reciprocity with as much empathy as possible, even for those people who really make me so angry and I
Yeah.
don't agree with anything they say? They may be your family members, they might have been former friends of yours, but
Hmm.
to approach them with love and an open heart and maybe the small gift of a mini quilt, maybe that starts a new conversation and says,
Hmm.
hey, I don't want to fight about it, but I do want you to understand me.
Yeah.
And if even after that they say no, then fine. You've tried your absolute best, but there is a place for textiles and all of that. Who's gonna get super mad at you? You come to them with a pair of mittens, a mini quilt, a little wall hanging, and say,
Right.
"Hey, listen, I've been thinking about you while I made this,
Hmm.
and I love you, and I think where you've gone is dangerous."
Hmm.
I'm constantly thinking about here in Canada and in the United States the number of people who have fallen down this so-called wormhole, this sort of like this place where the reality doesn't seem to exist anymore, and I, as a queer person, don't deserve to exist either.
Hmm.
That is really scary.
Yeah.
Like I was like, I thought we were headed away from that, but now we're headed back towards that. And I think the only way out of it, though, is to re-engage those people, is to deprogram them. Not
Right.
to get too deep into religions and other such things, but like I think a lot of these folks are actually victims of another capitalist enterprise that's masquerading as spirituality.
Yeah.
And,
Absolutely.
and I think once that got involved, you start to absolve the person in charge of his sins. Trump and all of their ilk are the biggest adulterers, and they're still doing it.
Hmm.
And then you have the people who were so
Worship them.
exactly, literally. And that's what they desire, and not dissimilar to the tech industry as well. And we're going to get into this, like spoiler alert for listeners of our podcast. This upcoming week we have a community care episode to pick everybody up off the
Mm.
ground after memory, grief, and the politics of remembering. We have a community
Yeah.
care episode. It's going to feature the Society of Inclusive Blacksmiths. Just
Mm.
such a cool organization, and they have a lot of like ways that they make their ancient craft super inclusive. And so I wanted to bring them on, Joy Fire and Lisa Gertson, because I wanted them to really explain how they do it. Like, because what they do in the world of blacksmithing as incredible women and Black folks and non-binary folks and queer folks is really just so inspiring, I think, for the quilting world, for the Quilt Guild.
Yeah.
And then we're going to do like a like a 3-episode documentary. This was like a big spoiler alert. Like we're going to
Oh
get
my
into
gosh. Exclusive.
we are, yeah. I'm very excited. And we're going to go all the way to sort of like techno capitalism as well. We're going to
Okay.
actually take the arc all the way from kind of the Champai revolts of 1301, all the way through the Luddites, all the way through everybody, who's used textiles as a means of rebellion and resistance, all the way up to and including against what we're currently facing, which is this algorithmic oppression, is
Yeah.
this constant social media, this thing that's feeding, a lot of people's insecurities about their quilts. There's a
Yeah.
reason that all the quilts start to look the same. It's because algorithmically, that's what pays off. So of course these
Yeah.
creators make more of the same things and so on and so forth. And then everybody's making similar things. And suddenly nothing's original anymore. So we're going to
Right.
get to that whole arc as well about how that's kind of exactly what these techno capitalists want. At the exact same time that they're stealing all of the artists' work to generate shitty AI slop,
My
then
God. Yeah.
also averaging it all out. So, like, if
Hmm.
we think forward here, the most hopeful thing about all of this is that those of us who are textiles artists and quilters and weavers, we're ahead. You can't do that. What are you going to do? Teach a robot?
Right.
Friends, they can't still, they don't have a machine that knows how to crochet yet.
Nope. That's what because I'm a crocheter, and that's one thing I will always yell at people. They're like, "Oh, I got this crochet thing at Target." I'm like, "Put it fucking back. Put it back. Do not engage with that, because that means that 29.99 crochet vest that you just bought means that somebody made maybe 45 cents making that by hand, because there's no machines that can crochet. It is a uniquely human craft art only.
Correct.
So don't fucking touch it. I will scream it from the rooftops. I will yell in your face. Don't touch it if it comes from mass produced bullshit.
And
Anyway,
in a lot of instances, it's actually forced labor as well. Like, I mean, this
yes.
gets even darker and deeper and more horrible the moments that you start to dig into it a little bit more.
Yeah.
But honestly, the same thing for quilting cotton. Like, again, if
Mhm.
you don't know the origin of your favorite quilting cotton brand, ask. They all
Right.
will tell you. Every single one of them will tell you. Some of it might surprise you. And if they don't have GOTS certification, or they don't have Okotex certification, ask them why not.
Yeah.
There are things that quilting brands do that they do knowing that it could harm our health.
Hmm.
And all it's going to take is one. We should have the quilters proposition in California. Those propositions are incredibly powerful because it reveals what's in them. I
Right.
remind folks all the time, the dyes have not been fully washed out of the quilting cotton that you're using if you haven't washed it. It's got sizing in it. When you're cutting it, it has fibers in the air. So all of these health implications also exist again and are downplayed by an industry because let's not think about it too much when there are actually certifications that they could achieve and
Hmm.
continue to maintain, but then they don't. Another one is B Corp. The organization I work is a B Corp. Lots of things are B Corps. So to me, the other thing that I've started challenging, even the small organizations, not your 1 and 2 and 3 mom pop shops, but I'm talking like a fabric line that is employing enough people and should be paying their designers better. My question back to them is like, why aren't you a B Corp? Why haven't
Yeah.
you certified your supply chain that it's environmentally and human rights good?
Hmm.
Like if you can afford to buy organic cotton, why aren't you?
Right.
It uses 63% less water. Oh, because it's not as crisp. I literally get told this stuff. And then I say, oh, but do you care about the environment? Of course I do. Well, our choices that we make have to match the values that we have as well. Right. So
Right.
that to me, it's like, but that's also one step at a time because you can't do it all at once. And
Right.
everybody's got a stash. So don't feel bad about your stash. Again, back
Right.
to the whole, I don't ever want to yuck your yum. So it's, I
Right.
don't feel bad. I never want to be like, you're terrible
Right.
people because we're not. We
Right.
all make these choices and behave in the way that we do because we're conditioned to.
Right.
None of us made these choices independently of any other external factors that this was going to be our favorite fabric line. And oh my gosh, it's actually made in China. And I didn't know. And they won't tell me what the human rights of the factory's like. They won't tell me if it's exclusively their factory.
Right.
Warning, like so versus other folks are like, actually, it's made in Korea. Here's the factory it's made at. Here's its
Hmm.
address. Like, okay, well, I've got some more assurances at this point from a health and safety standpoint that
Right.
these might be treated in slightly different ways, or maybe not. If you then start looking into the reports, right? We can't because we don't want everyone to make a surface level assumption either. There could be a factory in China that is way more environmentally efficient, human rights friendly, so on and so forth, than an American factory.
Right.
But our brain goes, oh, no, that's not possible. Well, it is actually possible because it's happening because a lot of material gets produced to that standard out of
Right.
China and then is resold into America as being organic and so on and so forth. Where do y'all think it came from? So again, it's not just about the country of origin. It's about who is buying it and then talking to them about their supply chain. And if the person behind you at the desk at QuiltCon doesn't want to have that conversation or doesn't have the answers, ask for the contact of the company that does.
Yeah.
Those are thought terminating cliches that happen in cults. Like,
Hmm.
oh, I don't know, or oh, that's above my pay grade, or I'm just the designer. No, no,
Hmm.
absolutely zero excuses. If you're standing behind textiles line A or acrylics producer B, I'm gonna ask you, where did it get made? What were the
Right.
health and safety standards of the people who made it? Because again, it's all about all of these small choices. It's that
Right.
make the act of quilting political. And you
Yeah.
can make little choices in how you consume. And in fact, that's sometimes the absolute best way to make the choices that matter the most to the companies.
Right. Yeah. Well, and being in, you know, whether you like it or not, being in a capitalist society, your money matters. Where you spend your money and where you know, focus on what you buy, that's your political power, because it is political. And the people who say, well, I don't want to get into it. It's like, because you're uncomfortable. I get it. And everything you do is political in a capitalist society. I mean, in any society really, because you're making choices that don't just only affect you every day, all the time. And and I think that is important to ask and to look into things. And if people do that dismissive, like, oh, I don't know, I'm not sure, well, how can I find out? Please point me in the direction of somebody who can answer my question. You got to keep asking instead of that being the conversation ender. You have to be comfortable with digging in. And I admit I haven't always been, the best at asking questions, but the more I right size my mental health and the more I focus on what I'm doing within the space, the easier it gets for me to go, ooh, I don't want to participate in that anymore. Like, um, I mean, I haven't talked about it in a while, but there were a few years in a row where I made a quilt, like Chevron, the oil company. They have their division that celebrates World AIDS Day, and then they commission a quilt to be made to be displayed at their big gala of donors. And I made quilts for that. They hired me to make quilts, and I just thought, what the fuck am I doing? What in the actual fuck am I doing? Because at first it felt like, oh my gosh, this is so cool for my business, but it didn't match my values. And so it always felt ugly. And so I stopped. I said, I'm not doing this anymore. I appreciate that you recognize the value of my work. They did pay me what I asked for. There was no questions asked. They were just like, yep, thanks. We'll send you the money. Again, you're a multi-bazillion-dollar corporation. You better fucking pay me my little measly $1,800 or whatever it was, But I just thought, okay, as I'm taking over this business, like, because I owned it with my family at first, and now it's just me. I had to get real with myself, and I think that's what a lot of religion does. Is it gives you a pass to not have to look at yourself in the mirror and take personal accountability. There are cult-ish tendencies of like conversation stopping, non-answer answers so that you can't argue. Who's going to argue with saying, well, Jesus is the standard? I'm sorry, why? For whom? Why do other people have to be likened to one religious figure to be considered good? Why can't you just be good because you're just good? You just are. Or why are we placing value on it? Good, bad, very binary, very black and white thinking. It's bullshit and it's used to oppress people. So I think inherently, when you start to look at those practices, you start to see yourself, right? Truly for what you're doing and what you're leaning into. And that can be so very uncomfortable for people, especially when it's not been your normal practice, especially when it's not been invited into your personal space at all. Like it took me until I was about 30 to actually start trying to understand myself and why I was doing what I was doing, how I kept ending up in the same cycles of relationships with people, and why I was what I was doing. And like, it's hurting my husband, it's hurting my kids, it's hurting me. Like, what am I do? Why am I doing this? But I was raised in organized controlling religion, and everybody's answers was just, you just got to pray, or that's just the devil trying to tempt you. There was no personal responsibility in any of it. So I think on the backside of that, my like conquest has been to understand why I'm doing what I'm doing. Again, lean into what I think is right and appropriate. I've unfortunately and fortunately built myself a career on quilting, on top of quilting, right? Like, I quilt for people. I podcast about quilting. um, but I also want to use that to talk about all of it, right? The good and the bad, the helpful and the hurtful, The fact that a lot of guilds are held in churches, and that's very uncomfortable for people. The fact that those guilds are very often run by a group of old white ladies who are often conservative and push the narrative and push people out because they don't want to accept queer folks. They don't want to accept colored folks, right? Like it gets very oppressive. And as a person who has run very far from the church, I have a hard time going to my local guild because it's in a church and it's very churchy and white lady. And I am a white lady, so I have to be careful there. Like I am what I am, but I also don't ever want to be the person that doesn't acknowledge it and doesn't try to use it for the betterment of the industry as a whole if I can, right? So anyway, I think
I love that.
the more we look at it, the more we dig in and the more we truly try to understand what it is. And I think that would be my ask, I guess, for people is like really set some time to think intentionally about what it is that you're doing. Why are you engaging with what you're engaging with? And to kind of point back to the kind of quote unquote non-traditional, which again is a whole different conversation, non-traditional style quilts, like you mentioned Heidi Parks and Zach Foster, which I would argue it's more traditional, right? Uh, in certain terms, right? If we're coming away from the luxury side of quilting to the necessity side of quilting, it's people used what they had. It's 3 layers. It keeps you warm. It works, right? And I'm very much in that camp. And as a long armor, I have certain things I need people to do for me if they want me to work on their quilt. But besides that, people are like, well, I called you because the quilt shop wouldn't quilt on this fleece. Why? Okay, I will. Well, I called you because the quilt shop won't use this blanket as my batting. Okay, well, I will. You know, again, I'm not here to yuck your yum unless it's going to cause problems for my machine.
No.
I will quilt it for you, right? Like, I'm not here to tell you what's a quilt and what's not a quilt. I can tell you that certain fabrics won't work very well with my machine, but it doesn't mean it's wrong. So I'm glad we're having this conversation. I'm glad we're talking about all these things because, as your podcast is illustrating so well, there is so much deep, deep history to fiber and cloth. And as a fan of like documentaries on Egypt and like that's why I often fall asleep too is I just throw on like an Egyptian documentary and fall asleep. It's they talk about, oh, we found this mummy. They're wrapped, and you mentioned it like
Mhm.
in your episode, this latest episode, each finger, each toe, each appendage of the body was wrapped individually in cloth. And there's there's like a vocal but also a silent like worship in it, right? Of the life that existed, of the person that was in that vessel, that flesh bag, if you will, right? They're no longer there, but their body represents the life they lived on this earth. And if we throw it away, if we put it all in a box and never look at it, if we forget that there's lives attached to the ends of those obituaries, right? Then yeah, the empire wins, they erase us.
Right. I mean, we're swaddled in it when we're born.
Mm-hmm.
And when we go out, we're wrapped in it.
Mm-hmm.
And same is true for history.
Mm-hmm.
All throughout history, empires have been won and lost on textiles.
Mm-hmm.
I say in the very first episode, it's called the Silk Road for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
The Spice Road or the Precious Metals Road. It's the Silk Road because of just how precious that textile was and that way of making it. And that extends throughout all empires. Empires have been won and lost on cloth.
Yeah.
I just finished reading because I'm a giant geek, an anthropological study of Viking cloth in Greenland because it's in
Uh-huh.
the news, and Iceland and here in Canada. And they use cloth as money,
Mm-hmm.
and the way that they wove it in certain places was very clearly money, and that demonstrated an incredible amount of women's power within these places because only women wove.
Yeah.
But conversely, it was also the women were incredibly homophobic. They spread
Mm,
and created homophobic rumors and myths and song, these Viking women, to keep men out of their weaving huts. So I
interesting.
read all of this and was just my mind blown. So yeah, empires have been won and lost on textiles, every single
Hmm.
empire. And in fact, if we take a look at the entire industrial revolution and subsequently, unfortunately, the transatlantic slave trade, a lot of it as well is yes, sugar, agricultural, but a lot of it is obviously cotton, and particularly when so many of historic touch points
Hmm.
have textiles in them. It just is so fascinating to me that we continue as makers and as creators to produce these artifacts, to produce
Yeah.
what the future will look at and be like, hey, I'm fond of saying, the AIDS quilt is 54 tons now, and it's still accepting new panels because AIDS isn't over.
Right.
So,
Just like
and
COVID isn't over.
just like the tally quilt that you're making, unfortunately, at some point it will need to stop, but it's
Hmm.
never going to be over. It
Right.
will be less, we hope, though. And maybe that's the real, hope in all of this, which is that throughout all of this political expression with textiles and fabrics and using it as the both the grounds for resistance and the means of resistance,
Right.
that people regain hope.
Hmm.
Really, when I'm out there making a beautiful banner and making a thing, I'm thinking of Mary Lowndes, right? The founder of the Suffragettes League, the Artist Suffragettes League in the United Kingdom, who said, a banner is something that you want to worship.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm always thinking is like, how can I create a banner that, or ideas or words or a feeling with my work that says, hey, you're going to be okay.
Yeah.
Let's have some hope here. Like, let's just
Yeah.
have a little bit of hope. Um, so yeah, I mean, I'm also really hopeful. Like I know we've talked a lot about politics and the current state of where politics is at, but I also see it as a giant pendulum, right? It
Hmm.
goes one way and then it will go the other. And we need to be prepared for when it comes back our way, as it were, when
Right.
the world is ready to see that queer folks and women and black folks and all of us need to not just be equal, but to have equity.
Right.
So when they
Right.
see that, when they really see that, okay, great. Well, then we're going to be ready for them. We're going to have the quilts for them to see. We'll wrap them up. We'll keep them warm. We'll give them our
Yeah.
red hats. Because again, I am convinced that we can't write everybody off
Right.
because they don't agree with us.
Right.
Because they say, no, I don't want politics at my quilt guild. Okay, no worries, but I'm still going to ask in a couple of weeks when we're back again.
Yeah.
Still gonna try again, like because again, I don't ever want to give up hope on humans.
Yeah.
I believe fundamentally in our ability to overcome our most violent tendencies, to overcome the way that we were once.
Yeah.
In our upcoming episode, I briefly mention an armor of the Tower of London, Catherine Lefebvre, from the 1300s. And my husband, we were editing it. There's a little behind the scenes thing, but my husband was editing it. He's like, the Cressy campaign. He's like, of the 100-Year War. And I said, yes. And he's like, Ian, this woman's armaments murdered 30,000 people. And I was like,
Mm.
oh yeah, that was a bad time in the world. Oh my God. So
Yeah.
the other thing is like, let's not forget, like, this isn't the worst the world has seen it, y'all.
No.
Like, we had a
Right.
woman armor of the Tower of London create enough armaments to slaughter 30,000 people across France in 100-year war. So,
Right.
y'all, we've gotten better. Humans had the Enlightenment at some point. We had the Renaissance. We woke. We were like, hey,
Right.
wake the
Right.
fuck up. So I think we're at that moment, y'all. I think we're at this inflection moment, and it's so tough and it's so difficult for us that the awakening that you had moving from a high control religion to where you are at now, that is happening all across the world.
Yeah.
Let's embrace it. Let's make quilts about that. I have never seen a quilt about that. I've never seen a quilt about that. Maybe they exist, but let's make quilts about that. Let's not
Hmm.
just make the quilts that say, no, this isn't what I want. I anti this. Let's make the quilts that say, this is what I want.
Hmm.
To oppose only is to never propose. You
Right.
can't be progressive if you never propose. I don't love to think of things as the left or the right. I like to think of things as progressive and regressive. I
Mhm.
would like to move things forward. And I want to do that with people who maybe don't have the exact same values as me because not everybody's going to. And my middle name's Danger. I'm a dangerous homosexual. Okay. Like I do things in my world that I don't expect everybody's going to be like, yeah, that makes a bunch of sense. And
Yeah.
that's okay. But I want to have space in the world where I can do those things, where I can be myself and not feel judged or worse, legally oppressed or absolutely worst, eliminated.
Right.
So to me, there is this hope. So make the quilts about the hopeful things too. Make the things about the society and the world that you want to see. Like I say at the end of every single episode, your hands know how to build the world we want.
Mhm.
I really think they do. And I think that I also think that, like what was Gil Scott Heron said, the revolution will be televised. I
Yeah.
think the revolution will be quilted.
Yeah.
I think the revolution will be quilted. I think that we are going to quilt our way out of all of these problems as long as those quilts get out of your house and off Instagram and into the real world. Who's going to walk past your political quilt and not pay attention?
Right. Exactly. Yeah. I think yeah, I think that that kind of shift from like right versus left to like progressive and regressive, I think is more encompassing. It's more welcoming because you can fall on that spectrum somewhere, and if you're on the regressive side, why don't you want things to change? And what would you change if you could, and why? Kind of digging into that, it I think it invites more question than just, again, that binary black and white, which is very high control. And I think that's why, you know, Christian nationalism has taken over America, because it's very high control. It's very black and white. It's very right versus left. It's that divide, like you're talking about, that, spin doctors, as you're recovering from, uh, are good at doing, is hammering that wedge in place so deeply that we can't see past it to understand that, like, we all want the same thing at the end of the day. I want to be able to house and clothe and feed my family. I want to be able to access healthcare when I want it. I want to be able to access, you know, support if I need it. I want to be able to help my neighbors if they need it as well. If I have enough, I want to be able to give the excess.
Exactly.
But it becomes this, like, because everything is through the lens of capitalism and business and making money, it's like, but what do I get out of it? Well, what's mine? I need to get mine. It's like, okay, honey, like, I think that's, can be where the sticky point is. But that being said, I like that you say that, our hands know, our bodies know. And I think when you dig into working, if you do mental health work, if you do therapy, if you do self practice, like, there's there's a knowing in your body. And I think, again, back to high control religion, high control political atmospheres, they teach you to deny that knowing. And well, that's the devil, or that's this, that it's written off as something other and evil, so that you let it go. And that, I think, has been the single most powerful thing that has come from my deconstruction, is going, oh, none of that was bad. None of those things I was feeling or thinking or knowing was bad. You just didn't want to deal with the impact of what I was calling truth to. So if we can kind of think about that and go, oh, what am I being told I need to think and feel? What am I being told I need to quilt in order to have value and worth in this industry or in this space? If your work is being devalued, look at who's saying it. Look at who is talking. Is it someone who's backed by an industry darling who makes millions and millions of dollars and isn't really doing much in the community to better the space? Is it somebody who just doesn't know anything because they've remained ignorant on purpose because it's too hard to feel feelings that are icky? I get it. It sucks ass, but, like, if we're going to get to a place where we can move forward together, we have to feel those feelings. We have to look at ourselves in the mirror and go, oh, baby, like, I've got you now. That shit sucked, but we can do this together. Like, talk to yourself, you know? And I think that's what quilting can be, is a conversation with yourself, of who am I and what do I want to communicate to the world, and how do I put myself into this piece to show people what my values are. And
Love it.
again, if it never leaves your home, if it never leaves Instagram, what's the point? So anyway, like, am I just rambling now? Do I need to stop
Oh, it's
talking?
great. I love
Probably.
it. I love
But
Plus, I'm
anyway,
also looking forward to your signature question because I'm ready. I'm ready for it whenever we're
oh,
ready.
my signature question is, okay, we're there. We're at that point. Ian Danger Capstick, what is a tip or piece of advice that you have for our dear gentle listeners?
Okay, I have it right here.
Okay.
Buy this book
Yes.
by Zach Foster. It's a step-by-step guide to narrative quilt making by Zach Foster. It's an absolutely beautiful book, written by him, lovingly edited by him and the folks at the Nook. And that'll be my other hot tip, which is that if you happen to be a queer quilter, I'm Quilt Queerly on Instagram, but I'm also hang out a lot virtually in the Nook, and particularly the LGBTQ room where I host, and I have regular sewing circles and those types of things. So hot tip, if you're looking for community like-minded people, like if you're like, oh, I need to find other progressives who do this quilting stuff. And we also
Mhm.
have a craftivism room that I help co-host. So we're around, like join the Nook. And if you don't have the exact cash to join the Nook, no worries. Just DM Zach on Instagram or email him, and he can usually work something out if you've got those needs. So like, we don't want it to be an exclusive space. He has like, there are like a couple thousand of us in there now. And it is really an affirming space where folks say yes before they would ever say no, and when
Mhm.
there's a question about how do I do something, there are 12 answers because there are always more than one way to do something in quilting.
Yeah.
Um, and I guess that's my last hot tip is that you do you. Like you're out there and you're busy doing other people's patterns and all these things, and you
Mhm.
haven't got that quilt mojo anymore, and you kind of like slow down. That's because you're not doing you. You do you. Learn to make letters, put letters on a quilt, put a poem on a quilt, just do something different, do whatever it is your heart desires, and that spark will come back. But if it doesn't, visit us over at the Nook and we'll sort you out. we'll get your creative mojo going back on and going. There's a whole thing going on this year called Wonder Year, which is a whole creative reimagining of your quilting practice and how
Mm.
you approach it and all of those types of things. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's my hot tip. That is my hot tip.
I love it. And I second that piece of advice. Buy that book. I got my copy, and it's incredible and inspiring. And I think that, yeah, like, if you're feeling in a rut, it's a good way to kind of work through some of that and get
And
back
what a
to
great
your,
mantra, right? The world needs your next quilt. Yeah, they
yeah.
do. Whatever it is, whatever that quilt is, the world needs it. And that's awesome. And it could also change the world.
Right.
Like, and that's not hyperbole. Like, that's like, it could actually arrive at QuiltCon and it could be the winner and it could spark a conversation 2 years later and continue to have those conversations, which,
Yeah.
yeah. So, yeah, the world needs your next quilt. There's my hot tip.
Yeah. I love it. I love it. Well, thank you so much for joining me, Ian. I've had so much fun chatting with you, and I am going to need to take some time to decompress and process everything we've talked about. But I'm looking forward to your future episodes of Art Against Empire. So far, it's been so incredible. I've got like, I listened to the first one, I started the second one, but then I saw episode 6 and immediately listened because I was like, this feels pertinent, and it was and is. And so I need to finish the others, but I'm very excited for what's to come because it's been very well done so far. I think if anybody's looking for something new to dive into, and it's a very easy listen, and thank you for doing that work and for sharing that with us.
Thank you for having me on the show.